Hmm.
if anybody
Mhm.
else wants to start, I can start. Okay, so I was watching this interesting program with Dr. Mohammed Al-Tullabi. He's from Morocco. I think the program is in Turkey, but he was talking about democracy and the curve of democracy as a human improvement trace or something that happens not only for Muslims or Europeans. So he connected. He wrote, who drew a curve where the European came to democracy, then it start moving from France to Britain to here to there. But then after all the time, Rabi al-Arabi, to him, the Arab Spring, considered as a Rabi al-Demokrati, the democratic spring. And what happened, I mean, we know the end, but that's not the final end. It's gonna come back again. But that made me think about what Malik ibn Nabi drew. He drew a curve for the Muslim civilization, where in the beginning we have the Nubuwa, where Sayyidina Muhammad came and he implemented the perfect state. But then, Muslim could not keep Sayyidina Muhammad. So something happened with the curve. So started going down. The decline happened on the stages. So there's a question during this program came the difference between shura and democracy. And some Muslims consider, oh, there is big difference. Others look at the values, the maqasid, where in the shura, if you look at the maqasid, you will find a lot of similarity between democracy and shura. And I mean, we know we did not implement shura after Khulafa al-Rashidin. Shura was just a name, or somebody will discuss it theoretically. But in real life, we did not develop a system for shura. So we can maybe, I don't know if that's a good subject to discuss, the maqasid of Sharia and how we can put democracy through this maqasid.
Good question.
That's my question.
Well, that's a good question. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala rasulullah, ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. And I'd like always to put things in perspective. One of the things that I worried about and I'm really wanted to be fixed in the mind of Muslims, that democracy is not a goal, it's a mechanism. Because nowadays, some people became so obsessed with the democracy. And we have seen in some Muslim countries, there have been election and political parties and all the mechanics or appearances of democracy, but there was no justice.
Yeah.
So we should really put things in perspective that justice is the goal. And democracy is a mechanism to establish justice. And therefore, this way we cannot be fooled by the appearances of democracy. And democracy should never become a goal in itself. It's like freedom. Some Muslim countries, they became so excited and happy when they had freedom of expression, to the point they forgot that freedom is an essential right. It was taken away from you and you get it back, and that's it. It should not be like an ultimate achievement that will make you so excited that you really don't want anything. That's what happened in some countries, unfortunately. So the purpose or the goal is justice, and justice cannot be deceiving. We cannot be deceived. It's very clear whether there is justice or not. But democracy can be fake. Justice cannot be fake. Democracy can be fake. You can have all I mean, we have seen it in Sudan, we have seen it in Lebanon, we have seen it recently in Tunisia. Elections, parties, parliament, everything. But there is no justice. So what's the point? That's the first thing. The second is that we were way ahead when it comes to democracy, because if you look at the time of Khulafa al-Rashidin, you will find all the elements of democracy. And more importantly, you'll find justice. So you will find real justice that is based on real, authentic democracy. Because if you think about it, democracy is people ruling themselves, like leadership by consent. Nobody imposes himself on people. Leadership by consent, and that happened at the time of Khulafa al-Rashidin. Transparency, and it was there. Everything is transparent. Accountability, and it was there. Those leaders were very accountable to people. Consultation, and it was there. But unfortunately, we failed to institutionalize it. So it remained dependent on those high quality people, individuals, and high quality leaders. And therefore, when the numbers changed, because in the early days of Khilafah al-Rashida, the core group of companions constitutes a big percentage of the population, or a reasonable percentage. But as the population was growing, especially at the time of Umar al-Khattab, when they swallowed two empires in few days, they swallowed the Persian Empire and the Roman Empire. Because if you think about it, there are only few days apart, the Battle of Qadisiyah and Yarmouk. And by the way, they are considered among the major battles that changed history.
Yeah.
Not by Muslim, by just people who study history, and when they list the major battles that changed history, they list those two battles, Qadisiyah and Yarmouk. So the ratio changed, and therefore, there is the charismatic characteristics of Umar ibn al-Khattab, someone that is really not easy to find all the time. So we failed to institutionalize it, and the Shura and all those elements that I mentioned were relying mostly on the quality of leaders and the quality of individuals who represented a good fraction of the population. When that has changed, we had a different leader in Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu, and there was major transformation, explosive expansion, that first of all, that was way beyond the simple administrative capacity that was there in Medina, and was way beyond the ability to integrate those large number of newcomers. That's where the deficiency came out, that the lack of institutions came out, and the world has gone through centuries. I mean, we missed a great opportunity to be really leading the world in terms of institutionalize the democracy very, very early on. The world went through centuries of dictatorship and imperial rules and dynasties everywhere, including Muslims, until Europeans were able to come up with this democratic system. So something that was done centuries late. It should have done at that time, that institutionalization. Europeans came out of necessity because there was major changes in demography in Europe. There was new class of middle class people, with the industrial revolutions, the population makeup changed. It used to be clergy and aristocrat and the king, and now we have a new group of people, a new class of the population that needed to have a say. And these people, they were running businesses, and they came up with that system out of necessity, that we need to change. We cannot continue with the current formula of king that has an absolute power surrounded by the clergy and by the aristocrats. We cannot, because there is a new class that wants to have a say, because it has some power, it has some economic power. So anyway, and they managed to come up with a system that is working very efficiently. It really achieved justice, even though it's not really perfect justice, but as Churchill said, it's the worst system unless compared to others. Now there is no question that the more democratic countries are, the more just the world. I mean, even economically, if you see like China and Russia, etc., but they are terrible in terms of their citizens' right, or they almost have no right. The managed to institutionalize that system. This idea of shura and democracy, I see it very artificial. There is no point to keep arguing. It's very semantic. The shura is Islam does not have a political system, and it shouldn't, because it was meant to be valid for all times and all places. And it left large room for people to make ijtihad and manage their lives. أنتم أعلم بشؤون دنياكم, Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, left large, but there are guidelines. Like everything else in Islam, most of the bulk of Islam is guidelines. We made it into law. We made it into very rigid law by the fuqaha, etc., and their followers. But in general, Islam is it's a revelation, it's a guidelines, it's a spiritual uplifting. It doesn't mean there are no rules, but it's not like a book of law, as now some Muslims see it. So Islam has some political principles. One of them is shura. وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. It did not say, consult with them. It says consult with them, and when you reach a decision, go for it. Tawakkal ala Allah. Did not say how you reach that decision. Did not say make it a presidential system, parliamentary system, go by majority, go by 2/3. Didn't say anything. It says وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. And it's an amazing guideline. It's a consultation and decisiveness, but find a way to make this happen. Find a way or develop a system that will ensure consultation and ensure a say for people. At the same time, there should be no paralysis. And of course, the Prophet ﷺ perfected that model. He was very consultative, but he was very decisive. So there was no dictatorship, and there is no consultation till paralysis. Every time he will gather people and consult. There was no exact system on how to do it, but there is a consultation, shura, and there is azm and hazm, which is decisiveness. Once a decision is reached, then you go for an implementation. So we only have ourselves to blame. The Islamic principles are there. They were implemented, Islamic political principles, which are very consistent with democratic principles. are there in Quran. They are there in the seerah of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. They were practiced by Khulafa Rashidin. Transparency, equal opportunity, accountability, all of them were there. I mean, the elements of democracy were there. Again, we only have ourselves to blame that we did not institutionalize it. And nowadays we are not able to copy it, because now we don't need to institutionalize it. It's already there. But even when we try to copy it, we copy and paste, it still did not work. Why? Because believe it or not, we Muslims in general, our mindset is not democratic. And we don't practice democracy even at home. We're not democratic in mindset. There are those centuries of oppression, and the fatwa of the fuqaha of hukm al-mutaghallib, that whoever managed to get power and establish law and order, then their ruling is legitimate, and therefore we should bay'a or obey them, etc. This is fiqh. For centuries, it is in the back of the minds of Muslims, because they think that the alternative, and they have seen, they have seen in history that the alternative for that is chaos and civil war. So if you are to choose between chaos and civil war on one hand and an oppressive regime, people choose oppressive regimes. We are not democratic. We even oppression nowadays, people are not rejecting it or opposing it because by principle. Those who are objecting oppression, it's because they are not benefiting from it, because they are the victims of it. Of course, there are exceptions. There are always people with the pure intention, people who love freedom and love democracy and love justice and patriotic, etc. But I'm talking about especially the political elite who are fighting for power. Their problem is not with oppression by principle. Their problem is with oppression because they are the victims of it. They are outside. If they get to power, they probably be more oppressive than the current regimes, and we have seen that. So that's why I no longer believe that our problem is those dictatorships, and if they go, things will be fixed. That's not true. We have seen it, and we should learn our lessons. Our problems are very deep in the mindsets, in the personality that was damaged by centuries of oppression and stagnation and backwardness, etc., that left people with big intellectual, psychological damage, and with a lot of religious misconceptions and a lot of wrong ideas and unhealthy elements in our culture. And therefore, this is not going to be changed by just having elections and political parties. In any Muslim country, especially Arab countries, nowadays, if you establish democracy, if you topple those regimes, you will have parties fighting for power for the sake of power. And they are willing by any means, the end justify the means. They are willing to sell the country, they're willing to do anything just to get to power or to stay in power. And it's about time to realize that the job requires a lot of reform, religious reform, and also intellectual reform, and the prevalent ideas, the ideas that are there spread in Muslim countries and Muslim societies, do not allow for any renaissance or any democracy or any major change. What you're gonna get is only formal changes or formalities, that will change, but nothing nothing major will change. Why? Because the rule is very simple, Quranic rule. Nothing will change until you do. إن الله لا يغير ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم. If you have the same people, think the same way, behave the same way, interact the same way, same mindset, same behavior, same muamalat or interaction, same results. It's not going to change. I mean, and insanity is to keep doing the same thing and expect different results. It's not going to happen. So it's about time to realize that the job needed is way beyond having parties and election. It's about it's a revolution. It's an intellectual revolution. Revolutions in the domain of ideas and treating the damage that was caused by centuries of oppression and stagnation, etc., and by all these religious misconceptions that are taken for granted now.
May I add something, Doctor?
Sure.
I think this is a very important question, a very important discussion, but I don't think it's a religious issue. It's a cultural issue. As you said very correctly, thank you, the Quran gave guidelines. The guidelines basically are to have the shura, basically everyone should have a say, freedom of thought, freedom of expression. Number two is justice, achieving justice and general benefit for the population. I think we Muslims are no different from the Japanese, from the Chinese, from the Germans, from other people. I think it is up to the elite to study the situation in Germany after World War II, in a place like Singapore, a place like South Korea, a place like Japan. Unfortunately, most of these came to become much better after a major disaster, if you look at it. I mean, Germany, it took a disaster like the utter defeat in World War II for them to come together as a nation and decide to do something different. And same thing happened in Japan. It was the absolute rule of the emperor. You could not even look at the emperor. He was the son. And the emperor had to be defeated utterly and go and be humiliated on a US ship for the elite of Japan to come together and decide to come up with a system that suited them. Doesn't necessarily have to suit us. But it is up to our elite, those who are actually patriotic, who have the best interest of their nation and their people in mind, to face a certain difficult situation. I mean, the same thing happened in France. I mean, look at the French Revolution. It was a basic famine. People couldn't find bread to eat, and they decided to kill all the royal family and the rich people and come up with something. It seems to be not failing. It takes a major disaster. I'm not talking about us Muslims. I'm talking about general, sociology. I mean, history and sociology. It's not correct for us to keep thinking about how Umar did it, radiallahu anhu, or how, let's say, Iran did it after the Shah, or how I think we need to study different recent civilizations that succeeded in doing something better, much better for themselves and improve. And we have to come up with something that achieves the basic ideas of equality and justice and freedom of expression. There is no answer if we go back to the fuqaha. There is no answer if we go back even to Khulafa al-Rashidin or Asr al-Nubuwa. Of course, it's a major guidance. I think I read it once. There was a major thinker in Iran. His name was Ali Shariati. And one of the things that impressed me, he said something like, the Islamic democracy, if you will, Hukm Shura, that happened during the life of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam and Khulafa al-Rashidin, was only an example for us, for the rest of civilization and history to look at and try to achieve. It was done in for a short time, short period, in a limited space and time, for us to say it can be done. How can we do it now? We need to reinvent basically how we can do it now. My brother, by the way, who's the Mufti of South Lebanon, and he has a PhD in comparative law, is very much impressed with the American system, for example. He says, it's one of the best, the checks and balances and all these things. Of course, we're not saying, okay, let's all adopt the American democracy, because it has its faults now. Now it's facing major challenges in representation. But yes, I think it's up to our, elite, educated elite, who really care about the future of our nation, to study recent examples of success and come up with something that will suit, and doesn't have to be common for Pakistan and Egypt and Tunis and Lebanon and Palestine or Saudi Arabia. It can be adjusted based on everybody's different culture and needs. So it is not a question of what does the Quran say about this, or what did the Hadith say about this. I think we touched on the important point. This is al-maqasid. This is that needs to be achieved. Freedom of expression, justice, social welfare, what's best for the nation. Okay, what do we have to avoid now? We study from recent examples. Big money needs to be avoided. It needs to be limited. Like in this country, unfortunately now, the lobbyists and the big money, they basically control the political process here. Not you and me. I mean, we can go and vote for Trump or Biden. It's not going to make any difference. I mean, I gave up on that. But yes, we need to study and come up with something that suits us in our limited space and time. And it has to be an evolution. It doesn't have to be a fixed thing. We cannot keep following some of the old political Islamists. Let's bring back Khilafah al-Rashida. Let's bring back Khilafah al-Uthmaniyya. It's even worse. A lot of people today think that the solution is to bring back Sultan Al-Hamid, Abdul Hamid al-Thani. Well, if he was so good, why did he fail so utterly? I mean, no. Let's not keep going back to history and look for the answer in the old tradition. I mean, this is the whole point of our discussion over the few weeks that I was part of this discussion. We need to look at our tradition with respect. It is only human history that has its great moments and its great failures. We need to study it in light of the general principles that need to be achieved, and we need to evolve, learn, and come up with something that suits us today. This is basically how I feel about it.
Yeah, well, it's I mean, this whole idea of going back to history and just duplicate something that was done is one of those religious misconceptions that are there. A lot of Muslims, they think that the ideal situation is for Muslims to have khilafah and to have a khalifa. In the same way they see it on TV and on history series about history of Islam and Muslims. Things can never go back. All what you need to do now is you have clear maqasid, or ultimate purposes of Islam, and you have the point where humanity has reached, and then you start from there trying to achieve those maqasid. There is no point in thinking about copying any system from history. Humanity has reached this system of democracy, which, by the way, is not applied exactly the same way everywhere. There are adjustments. People are making adjustments. There are some countries where all the elections are financed by the state. So there is no role of money in politics. There are some places where the election cycle is only a few weeks or a couple months. It's not like here that we are always in election season. The American system is one of the best. There is no question about it, but it has its own flaws. There are the Northern Europe countries. They have excellent economic system, which is not socialist, was not capitalist like absolute capitalism. It's called mixed economy, led by the Social Democrat. It's something that we should be able to look into. The success stories. I don't want to go all the way to Germany and Japan, because Germany and Japan may not be the best for us to copy, because even before the war, these were advanced nations. But they were ruled by dictators, and then they were, as you said, managed to. But the more recent success stories are things to study. It's not, again, there is no duplication. Every country is different. Every context is different. But there are lessons that we can learn. We can find what are the elements that made those, that were behind those success stories. I can tell you that for us, based on those stories of success, and that for us as Muslims, I personally cannot see that we're going anywhere unless there are two things that are met and are done. Now we are in need of two major projects to happen in parallel. One is a national shared vision or dream. That's what happened in many of those successful countries, that people, they believed that their country should and can be better. Majority of Muslims today do not believe that. Majority of Muslims today, they are in state of despair. Nothing is going to happen. Nothing is going to change. We are doomed, etc. So one is for people to develop a core group of people to develop and sell and succeed in selling and marketing a national dream or national vision, that someone will imagine themselves living like a citizen in Sweden or in America, or like you have all full rights, you have equality before the law, you have a say, you have this and that. So that nowadays, it's something that is going to be very difficult, especially after the failure of the Arab Spring. But it needs to be done. There is a national dream or vision that should be developed and articulated by people who are sincere, not people who are using it just to get to power, people who are sincere and try to rally the masses around it. It's like the dream of independence. That state, the state of the people in the face of occupation, that's the state that is needed. When people are mobilized and united, they forget or put aside their differences for now, because there is a major goal that we need to achieve. Without this element, we're going nowhere. We have seen that even when the regimes were toppled, nothing has changed, nothing has improved. So there is a national dream and state of mobilization and unity, similar to the state of the population that were similar to the Palestinian population nowadays, where people may be very different on many things, but they are not, they converge on resisting the occupation. That's the same thing happened in different countries when they were occupied. Unless we manage to create that state, that situation of people who are mobilized and united around a national vision or a national dream to make their countries prosperous, to make their country advance, develop, justice, industrializations, etc., etc., etc. In parallel, we need a similar project of religious reform, because with this current version of Islam, we're going nowhere. With the current versions of Islam that are prevalent in the Muslim world, with all the misconceptions in them, we're going nowhere.
Yeah.
The current versions of Islam, they justify failure in the name of qadar, destiny. They justify oppression in the name of stability and order. They justify, there are so many misconceptions there. People are not very ambitious. People, the characters, cheating and lying and lack of work ethics. And with this current version of Islam, we're going nowhere. So in addition to that national project, national dream, national vision that need to be developed and articulated, if you think about it, that's what Erdogan did. That's what Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore did. That's where Kim in South Korea did. For us, I don't think we can afford to be waiting for this magic leader or party to do it. It has to be grassroots. Because we waited for so long, and there are no indication that it is happening anytime soon. This idea, our elite, they are obsessed with power, and they are willing to get there by any means. So there is no point in waiting or putting our hopes on elites or on politicians. It has to be grassroots movement, like the movement of resistance against occupation. If you think about it, those movements that had no founder. I mean, who established the movement of resistance in Algeria? Nobody knows. It was not like one time one individual said, we're starting today. It happened organically. It's a grassroots and then it produced its own leaders. But it did not come, it's not top down. And look at any resistance, even Palestinian resistance. I mean, you can point to some leaders, you can point to some incident, but you cannot say this individual or this party is the one who started resistance at this moment. No, it's always like that. And our situation now is no different than under occupation. The only difference is the objective. At that time, the objective was independence and to push and kick out the colonization. And now your objective is to end the state of backwardness and stagnation and become really an advanced nation that is very productive, that has a very very just laws and policies where people fulfill all their duties and also stick to all their rights, and where people have work ethics, when you have a very good education system, when you have really a decent life that so many people around the world are living. We're talking about a dream that is a reality in many countries in the world, and many countries in all continents, and countries with all sizes. You have poor, and you have China, you have etc., who were able to become very advanced nation. And these are China until the 80s, one of the poorest countries in the world.
Yeah.
Indonesia until 70s was the poorest country in the world. So that there are success stories and models, and you can see that in all these cases, some of them there was a leader who initiated the thing or a party, but in majority of cases or in other cases, it was a grassroots movement and a bottom-up approach. And I think for Muslim countries, there is no point in waiting for that exceptional, honest, sincere, patriotic leader and qualified, capable to come, because I don't think it's happening anytime soon.
No. But by the way, Bangladesh is a place to keep your eyes on.
Yeah, it's coming.
I was very impressed. But what they did, it was a vision of a man. His name was Yunus something. He started the bank for poor people, and it was an Islamic idea, if you look at it, to the core of it, to the spirit of it. Empower the very, very poor with very small loans. Let them start a very small business. It was economic in nature, but the leaders, Sheikh Husseina, I'm not sure what her name is, they supported and they created the infrastructure. And I mean, Bangladesh is on the rise. It was one of the poorest countries in the world until very recently. I was
It
extremely
was the
happy to
poorest.
the
Yeah,
poorest
it was the
countries.
poorest, and the numbers are very impressive. It was that initiative that you mentioned, but also there was some savvy political leaders who identified areas of strength
Yeah.
where the country can capitalize on, and now they are in textile, one of the major producers of in that sector in the world. And that's what most countries have done. It just identify an areas where you can excel and capitalize on it. And you can see India in the IT recently. Everybody identified, and that's where ideal situation when you have an elite with economic visions and initiatives and savvy political leaders who also have a vision for the country. And then the result now, Bangladesh, until very recently, it was a country that is mentioned only when we talk about poverty and relief. That's all. Now the numbers are very, very impressive in terms of percentage of people who are educated, the poverty level. They achieved major successes.
True. There is a book I want to suggest that everyone reads. I think we touched on 2 points, Doctor. I'm sorry if I'm taking the turn of some other people, but we mentioned 2 things: reform in our thinking about Islam and reform in our vision of our national identity. On the second issue, there is a book that if people are interested, I can share it. It's by Anis al-Naqash. It's called Al-Confederaliya al-Mashriqiyya. It is basically an idea based on the very current situation where superpowers are being reshaped around the world. You know, before you had America and the Western world. Now you have multipolar system in the shaping. And the major question is, where do we Muslims fit in the middle of all of that? By the way, I want to add the African resurrection, if you will. We used to, I personally used to feel a little bit better because there are people worse than us who are sub-Saharan Africa. It seems that these people are going to get better now, and we will have no one to compete with us for the last place. The Africans are getting better. So it's a major challenge for us in the Middle East to find our place in history in this extremely volatile and changing time. And if we fail to do it in the next 10 to 20 years, I think we will be in much worse shape than what we are today.
I want to go back a little bit to the same subject, and I think the analysis is great, but I want to just have this example and maybe several cases to just shed the light on the issue. Now, if I go to the doctor or anybody, usually what they do, they measure your temperature. There is a thermometer. They take the temperature, they measure the blood pressure, and there's like something to indicate your situation, if you are healthy or unhealthy. Now, if the temperature is high, that means you are going in a bad situation or an unhealthy situation. Same thing I would call history direction or history indication, going up or going down. Now, when Islam started, the atmosphere became going up, but there is other forces hidden you know, the job of Sayyidina Muhammad was our prophet, our beloved prophet, was to educate, to purify, which is tazkiyah, and but that means there is other forces. Why you educate? Because there is other forces that doesn't want this, and why you purify? Because there is other directions that doesn't like what you're doing. Anyway, but the thing is, there is other forces. I would call there is a reverse in direction in Islamic history after Khulafa al-Rashidin, where like it's a ridda. I don't know the exact meaning of ridda, the word, so for everybody to understand, but it's kind of going direct against. It's not the ridda after Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, where people refused to pay zakah or to do salah. I think the major ridda or the major reverse or decline was going from real shura to tribal dictatorship. So the direction of history at that time went back, going back. That's the state. But still, if you look at the state where like we have that, we start the dynasty level government and all that, but still we had at one time al-Mu'tazila, or the thinkers or the intellectual people. Abu Ali al-Jabba'i defined the homeland as the place where you can say your opinion freely, you fear nobody, and where you can do your stuff, your sha'air, your prayers, you do everything without any fear. And I think people asked him if Baghdad is at that time is Dar Islam or a homeland of Islam. He said no. I mean, if you apply these measurements, these thermometers on that situation, it's not. And that's I mean, I'm trying to say there is a reverse in the direction. Also, if you have intellectual level, then you will see some changes. Same thing if we go to Europe in the 1400, maybe a little bit more before, it was under dictatorship, and you cannot say your opinion. Lots of people, lots of scientists came and start to say the center of the universe is not Earth. They were prosecuted and maybe killed or something, and their books were banned and they were maybe burned or something. So at that time, there was a baby steps movement toward going up, toward a big change. After a while, if you look at after 1 year, after 100 years, and another century, and another century, this movement start becoming it take more momentum, and become strong. At one time, the government start changing. Democracy found the real environment or real atmosphere to grow. So this is the thing. What I'm trying to say, you cannot ask people with the situation or a state of thought where it's or intellectual state that's not that high, it's going against history. You cannot find democracy there. Or if you try to implement that democracy, like what happened in the Arab Spring, it's going to fail because you still have the state of that society is really not that high. You need a higher level. The intellectual level needs to be high. Look at China. I mean, we know China is controlled by a party, and there is no democracy. Or there, it's not like what in Russia. Russia is one person maybe, or a group or something. But in China, there is a party because they changed the president, but the party stayed. But if you go before, when Mao was the leader, it was worse than this. So it's what I'm trying to say, the state is going up, the intellectual state. So when Mao was there, he was trying several national projects, but it failed. But the people were trying to do something. So the state of the society was going up. Now when Xi came, he changed a lot of stuff, and the one before him. So it's going up toward maybe better democracy and all that. Same thing in Russia. I think the same thing. Now Putin took the country from Yeltsin, Yeltsin destroyed everything, or maybe it was destroyed by the one dictatorship party, which is the Communist Party. Now, I think this rule we can apply to everywhere. If you have intellectual state of any society, then you can expect them to have a real democracy. Without, and I agree to both of you when you said we need to work on reform. Of course, we need to work on reform. We need to change this mentality, this mindset, so we can have a result that suitable to that mindset. I hope I did not go too far.
Actually, it's you're right. It's a two-way relationship between the state of the society and the state of minds. It can be synergetic cycle, and it can be vicious cycle. Synergetic cycle meaning any improvement in the mindset of people, in their behavior, in their interaction, will be reflected in improvement in the society, and vice versa. Better society will also encourage and even put pressure on people to behave. I always use that example of driving or throwing things in the street. A lot of Muslims in European countries, they spend 10 months of the year, they never violate any traffic law, or I mean, at least try, and they never throw something in the street. But the moment they go home, they start doing it. So what's the point? Because the social norm puts some pressure. If you are the only one who is gonna violate the stop sign or the red light, you will not do it. But if everybody else is doing it, then it will be hard for you to abide by the law. So there is this two-way relationships between the two. And if you think about it, if you read and study the some of the success stories, for example, let's take them, Malaysia, for example. It's the man who did it said that. He said that I didn't do anything. I just changed the education system, reformed the education system, so it produced different people with different minds, and they are the ones who made this success story example. But also, if you think about South Korea and Singapore, both of them, their takeoff happened under dictators. But subhanallah, enlightened dictators, but when they brought the country to a certain point, when people became highly educated and etc., they no longer accept dictatorship. So they made that transition. It's like the airplane, the flight, there is a takeoff and then there is the cruising. They made that transition nicely. Saying basically, they almost say, thank you very much, you made it, you brought us to this point, but now in this kind of standard of living, we cannot accept dictatorship anymore. We need to have a say, and we need to have, it's very similar to what happened in Europe, that there is, in Europe, there was a new class that pushed toward democracy. In those countries, it's the new standard of living. People who became educated and middle class and etc. So they pushed for democracy and for democratic reform. So you can see the two-way street. It's either changing people, they change the situations, or changing the situation will reflect in changing the people's mind and the people priorities, etc. If you look at the example of Europe, as Brother Muhammad was mentioning, I think what we need is something very similar to what happened in Europe. What happened in Europe was a Reformation, that was the religious project, and Renaissance, that was the intellectual project. The Muslim world nowadays need both. They need a religious reform project, because if Europe remained under the authority of clergy, and the Catholic Church, they would have gone nowhere, because they were fighting science, fighting initiative, fighting everything. And the Renaissance, the intellectual people, the thinkers who produced new ideas in the society, and then the two produced what you see. Got Europe out of the very bad situation. Europe was in terrible situation. I think in most Muslim countries nowadays, that's what is needed. We cannot hope for a leader or enlightened dictator to do that takeoff and then make the transition like South Korea or Singapore. I don't think that's going to happen. I think what we need is a grassroots movement and a nice synthesis between the patriotic drive and the religious, the Islamic drive. Unfortunately, the contemporary Islamic movement failed miserably to make that synthesis between the two. They injected Islam in politics in terrible way, in the wrong way, which did not benefit politics, did not benefit Islam. It actually caused harm to Islam and did not do any benefit to politics. What we need is new, again, the two projects, as I mentioned. One is similar to the Reformation, even though it doesn't have to be called that, or which it's not about copying, but we need a religious reform. And one similar to the Renaissance, it's just a lot of, and the best way to do Renaissance, it's not to wait for few thinkers to publish books and change minds, ideas. I think that the Muslim world nowadays can be changed only by national shared dreams. Shared dream. One national shared dream that will mobilize and unite people. There is no other way. Waiting for a dictator, enlightened dictator or a political leader to do it's not going to happen. And waiting for few thinkers to publish new ideas and change the minds of people, it's not going to happen. What will happen, what can average people understand, is that national dream. I know it's much more difficult job than selling them independence, because independence is so simple. There is a foreign soldier, army. We want to kick them out. There is no much explanation needed. I know this is more difficult. That's one. Second, it might be also difficult, not only because it is more complicated to sell and to articulate this dream or vision, but also because of the state of Muslims nowadays is very low. Morale is very low, very depressed, very disappointed, etc. So that's also can make it difficult. But remember that those who were able to sell the cause of independence, their job was not easy at all, because to come to people and tell them that we're going to find the French occupation or the British occupation, or recently the Israeli occupation, with very primitive tools, and only with a few people starting it, was a joke. People made fun of it. What are you talking about? This is the French army. This is the British. This is the Israeli, the army that can never be defeated. What are you talking about? And you see what happened. So our job today is not, overall, should not be more difficult than those who were able to initiate the movements of resistance to the occupation. Is trying to develop, articulate, and sell and rally people around a national dream or vision. That's how you mobilize people and you get the best out of them, until you manage to establish a system permanent. So we're talking about takeoff and cruising. The takeoff can happen only with shared national dream. The cruising will be with a system, democratic system, that will make that situation permanent.
Can I say something? No, go ahead.
Dr. Said, we say Islamic reform. I don't think the Muslim in America will accept this word. To want the people in Saudi Arabia or in Syria or Iraq to accept this Islamic reform, I don't think it's too strong word to tell the people this expression, Islamic.
Well, there is, I mean, even if we choose a better word, any major change is going to be met with resistance. People are willing to accept cosmetic changes, but major drastic change, they're always met with resistance. Of course, there are ideas that have been there for centuries, and now you're going to come to tell Muslims to put question mark on them. Of course, you're going to expect resistance. Quran tells us that the main objection of people to the messengers was, this is not what we are used to. إِنَّ وَجَدْنَا آبَاءَنَا عَلَى أُمَّةٍ وَإِنَّا عَلَى آثَارِهِمْ مُهْتَدُونَ أو مُقْتَدُونَ, etc. We found our ancestors, we have generation after generation. This is the way we practice Islam. We accepted these ideas, and now you're coming to challenge them. Are you telling me that I need to accept that for 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years I was wrong? That's not easy for people to accept. But that's the tax that people who pioneer change, they have to pay, which is to be made fun of, to be resisted, to be humiliated, to be mocked. That's the case, has always been the case. But this core group should firmly believe in their message to the point that none of this is going to discourage them or make them back off, because, again, it's a firm belief in a dream, especially when it is religiously rooted. They say, only for God and for country people are willing to die. Only for God and for country people are willing to die. If you manage to synthesize this national project or dream and rooted in Islam and in maqasid of religion, you will see wonderful results. You will see things that will shock you. Out of the people that you see them nowadays, way behind, and they are at the bottom of the list, all the lists. If we manage to make them believe in themselves and believe in the future and believe that future is worth all the sacrifice, and then root that in Islam. Because if you think about it, that's what happened in resistance to occupation. It was a national cause rooted in Islam. A lot of people were going jihad fi sabilillah. At the same time, they are trying to liberate their country. So when you manage among Muslims to synthesize a national cause, a national dream that is worthwhile, that is worth all the sacrifice, even if you care only about your family and your children, the best way to serve them is to leave them in a country that is just, in a country that is prosperous. It's not like leaving them some money and some properties or some business in a country that is corrupt and backward. That's not going to help them. It may be taken out of them in a way in no time. But the best way to serve even yourself and serve your children and your grandchildren is to work for a country to be more just and more prosperous. That's one. And second, that's the best way to serve your akhirah, to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because that's the purpose, the ultimate purpose of Islam is to make the world more just and more prosperous and more morally sound, and etc. So that's what we are missing. We're missing is articulate and develop and articulate and sell a national cause or dream or vision that is shared and then rooted, ta'sil, rooted in Islam. so that it will become something that unite all people, but also you have Islam there to motivate those who are motivated by religion. And we are nowhere close to there now. The first project does not exist, and the current versions of Islam, they divide societies. They divide, and this is Salafi, this is Ikhwan, this is this is that. They divide, they don't unite, and they don't mobilize. And if they mobilize, the current version of Islam, they mobilize in the wrong directions. They mobilize into the terrorism and etc. So there is no, they don't mobilize, and if they mobilize in the wrong direction, and they don't unite, and that's what we need. What we need desperately is state of mobilization and unity. So whether we say Islamic reform or reform, actually we are always clear that we are not talking about changing Islam. We are talking about changing the current understanding of Islam. We are the ones who are calling to go to the original Islam. And the original Islam is not Khalifa, or is not dressing in a certain way, and it's not, no, the original Islam, it's a movement of change that has established the first state based on constitution and citizenship, and then established justice, and then etc. So we're not talking about copying a part of history, or no, we're talking about understanding and simulating the Islam that was preached by Muhammad ﷺ, which transforms individuals, give them a mission, a life mission, and high purpose, which nowadays all the books, all the coaching books and self-help and self-development books, they talk about people. If you have what's the famous book, Purpose-Driven Life? They talk about if you want to change people, give them a mission or purpose in life. That's what will transform them. So, and for us, we don't have to reinvent it. It's there. Islam is a life mission. It gives you a life mission, it gives you very high goals to work for, but unfortunately that has faded, and the only thing that was promoted is the fiqh and the rituals, the sha'ar. So, and I'm not afraid about confronting people, because we are the ones who are talking to go back and find and rediscover the original Islam that was lost over the centuries because of stagnation, because of oppression, because of extremism, etc.
Doctor, I think we all agree on the value of education in all the success stories of the recent countries like
Absolutely.
South Korea and Singapore. I think we need to have more young people subscribe to this discussion, because I'm 63, coming to 64. I think you're probably in your 50s or maybe 60. Most everybody here in this discussion is not far from me or you. And this is good, except that it is our children who are doing their BS degrees and master degrees. And alhamdulillah, I think we raise them as best as we can. They need to start listening to this discussion. They need to subscribe to the idea that there is hope, that we don't need to melt in this melting pot called America. We need to safeguard and keep our national and cultural identity, and become the leaders of the future for this movement, which I agree with you 100%. It is twofold. It is Islamic, let's not say reform, because okay, it's Islamic going back to the origins, going back to the true Islam of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yeah.
Plus a movement of national vision based on economic improvement and justice system improvement and unity. We need to develop a clear message, basically, to subscribe to give to our young children, the ones who are becoming teenagers and graduating now, so they can take the flag, and people who will achieve this, the elite that we mentioned so many times, are us and our children, the ones with high education that have seen the West. By the way, we talk about China. Very interesting. The one who the real father of China's success is not Xi Jinping, is the one before him. I keep forgetting their names. They're difficult to remember. But
It's
this
not
guy
even
was
possible.
educated. He was educated in France. That guy was educated in France, and when he came, he became one of the aides of Mao Zedong. And Mao Zedong kept saying, you know, keep your eye on this shorty. He was a short man, Ping. I think his name was
Yeah,
Ping.
Ping,
Yeah.
yeah.
And he is the one, he is the real hero of China today. And this guy basically had his national identity ingrained in him. Plus, he saw how the West became better. He learned, he got educated, he's seen a better example. And he was the one who started the revolution in China. Xi Jinping is actually capitalizing and taking all the credit for it. But Ping was the
Yeah,
one who started it. So we
yeah.
here in the West, we live in America, you and me and our children. We are the ones who are thinking outside the box. I think our nations are counting on us, on our children to do this. And I hope each and everyone takes it personally and brings his children to listen to this. And I will do my best on my own.
And I firmly believe, Allah, I believe in what you said. I believe that this message, if it is marketed the right way, will resonate with number of people here and people in the Muslim world. Because with all the despair that is there now, there is also yearning for change, for yearning for something, looking for something. And words, if they are sincere, just keep in mind that Quran full of message of verses in which the prophets, they start by saying, we're not asking anything. قُلْ مَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَجْرٍ. If we can articulate this message and market it aggressively and in an effective way, and comes out very sincere that we are not running for office, we don't need your votes, we are not looking for your money, we're not it's just pure sincere message coming out of the bottom of our hearts that we think that we should not continue this way, and that in spite of how bad the situation is, it's not hopeless, and the formula or the manual are there. They require just people who are serious, people who are committed, people who are ready to put the efforts and the time, because you are trying to pull a community or society from very deep comfort zone that was developed over centuries and became very comfortable. And you are trying to get them out of this, to start believing in the future, believing in themselves, believing in change, and making it happen. I firmly believe that's, I mean, I keep always saying, whoever has a better way, please let us know. Until now, that's what I came to, this conclusion, that there are two major projects that are needed. One is reforming, one is political, national, shared vision or dream or cause or purpose that will mobilize and unite people, and one that is religious reform project that will turn Islam into a tailwind rather than headwind, turn Islam into mobilizing and uniting people and making them refuse injustice, and making them dream high and aim high and dream big, and then transform them and turn them into agents of change, as Islam did to those Arab Bedouin who used to be very average people, and it is Islam who made them the ones that we know, the great individuals that we know. It's doable. It's not easy. It has never in history a major change was easy. It will be opposed not only by outside forces, it will be opposed by Muslims themselves.
Yes.
A lot of changes in history were opposed by the people who are the victims, and the people who will benefit from the change, they were the ones who opposed it, who opposed those changes. But again, it requires a solid core group who will take that first shock and so they bite that and then continue and persist until minds start to change, social norm start to change, and that eventually situations will change.
I believe this is the core of what we started with. Tazkiyah
Yeah.
wa islah. Tazkiyah
Yeah.
wa islah. Now we're talking at the macroeconomics here.
Mhm.
We're looking at the bigger picture. Tazkiyah, islah, at the beginning sounded like a personal thing, but we can and we must turn it into something bigger. تفضل أخي محمد.
Yeah, well, I think Abu Abdullah point was my understanding is America is easier than the Arab world. I think it's the other way around, because from my evaluation, I could be wrong, but I hope I'm not. The situations there, I can see there is a movement. There is people start thinking. There is reform. There is people who say the understanding of Al-Azhar or these institutions are wrong and they are not doing any good to the Muslims. There is movement, and with different, some of them new Mu'tazila, others are just thinkers, others are like they start looking into the Sunnah and how the Sunnah is. I mean, you cannot just take the whole Sunnah; you have to compare it to the Quran. So there is several movements. The Salafi movement, the one that stopped all of the initiatives to do something to renew the situations, actually now it's going down. It's in the decline. At one time, it was the leading, and it stopped everybody. It was the break against Muhammad Abdu, Al-Afghani, Rashid Rida. It killed a lot of trials. But now I think back there it's much better. In here, my experience, which is it could be wrong too, I think people here are looking for starting to learn the Quran, how to read the Quran. But there, people understand it. So here, you talk to people, but they don't know what you're talking about, because they don't know what the Quran is. But if you go to, they want to go to the Imam, and the Imam usually is a traditional. And maybe if the Imam hears you saying something against what he's selling to the people, he will warn people about you. Don't listen to him. And I think that's happened to me, maybe others. But it's not that easy. It's hard, but we cannot stop. We have to keep going.
Right.
Okay.
Well, the Salafi movement, it's still dominant because it is going by inertia. But, as you all know, they recently lost major source of funding, which is Saudi Arabia. And that's going to have a big impact because there used to be a lot of money poured into the Salafi everywhere in the world. And now it's not there anymore. But the impact is still not felt, but definitely it will be negative impact on them. Yeah.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Suhail. Sorry, everybody, it's time 1:33, and we see you, inshallah, next Sunday, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. It was very interesting.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. مع السلامة.